Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I'm thrilled to welcome Michael Clogs of Depiction Media to our show today. Michael, thanks for coming on to Your Brand Amplified.
And Nika, it's just awesome to be here. This is like the highlight of my day.
Oh, well, you had me on your platform recently, and I'm going to definitely link that in the show notes so people can check out everything that you do. You do a lot, and I really want to talk. I was telling you a little bit about this before we got on. I really want to get your backstory because so many of us have times in our lives when nobody believes in us except for ourselves. And sometimes we don't really know if we believe in ourselves, but we persevere and we keep pushing through and have success and we get to where we wanted to go. And I feel like that is a story that you've definitely gone through in your life. Let's start there and then we'll get into everything else.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start that story off with, I just tweeted about this, that it took me almost till I was like 50 years old before I decided it was okay for me to love me.
Oh, man.
But I never let that hold me back, though. Growing up through the 1970s and everything, it wasn't really a cool thing to be of, say, a mixed race. Mm-hmm. And I was told by all through school that I would never achieve much. And matter of fact, in high school, they actually brought my mother into the guidance office and they said, well, he's trying to go to university and we need you to talk to him about not doing that because we all know people like you just simply can't achieve that.
Oh, my Lord.
Right. and my mother, she sat there and she told them, I'm not going to tell him that. And I'm going to let him do what he wants to do. Now, the really weird part to that is because I went to an all-boys Catholic school, that while the guidance counselor on one hand was telling me that, but the guidance counselor for me to like go into seminary was like saying, no, you need to come this way and we're going to educate you and all that. Because seminary is another university.
Right.
Not the college, right? It's like,
wow.
So it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
What they were saying, and at the time, all the levels of prejudice and everything that were in existence just didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So I did go out into the secular world and I went out into the public world and I became an engineer after being told I would never do it. Mm-hmm. I discovered that I was also and still am very dyslexic, and being in the science and engineering world, they helped me get over that.
Wow, that's amazing.
They helped me find tools to get around it. And I still use a lot of those tools now. And thank God for technology that our computers and everything can listen and transcribe what it is that we say. And then I have a copywriter on our team, and she actually owns her own business also. A girl with a pen, and she edits a lot of my stuff before I actually goes out there. So yeah. Which is pretty cool, right?
That is really cool. Where did you grow up? Because I know you live in Canada now, but you went to school in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I went to school in Pennsylvania, and I actually went to Penn State for chemical engineering.
Okay. So did you grow up in Philadelphia?
Yes, I did.
Oh, well, okay. This will be a separate conversation because my boyfriend is from Philly. So I'm like, I wonder if you guys went to the same school because he went to private Catholic schools and did that whole thing. But, the mixed race thing, because I grew up in Kansas. I'm half Asian, half Caucasian. There was nobody who looked like me. There was nobody for me to identify with. So I very much identify with you. And my parents, probably like your parents, were together before it was legal for them to be together, right? Like
we could actually say that in a lot of states that it wasn't exactly legal to be in a mixed marriage.
Yeah. It wasn't. My parents got married in the 60s, I think in the mid 60s. And I think it became legal in 1969 with the Loving family.
Yeah. I was born 3 years before a lot of the states decided it would be legal.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I remember, my mom's told me because I asked her and she told me stories about, oh yeah, your dad had their family friends, older family friends who said, are you sure you want to marry her? And a lot of that. So, and I think we do internalize a lot of that, and it makes us have doubt about who we are and our position in the world. So I'm really glad to hear that your mom stuck up for you. and that you knew you could achieve. And you went on to become an engineer, chemical engineer. But now, I mean, you've been in marketing for a very long time, various parts of marketing for different companies, and you have Depictions Media, where you're now sharing out people's stories and really celebrating people and their differences and who they are. So tell us about that. How did you get into media and marketing?
Well, what happened was at the age of 40, I was in a very specialized part of the chemical industry with semiconductors, where we were making the process chemicals that like made all the chips and wafers and all that kind of stuff. Some of our biggest clients were Samsung, Sony, and a few other like big electronics manufacturers. And I was able to test down, and this is going to like really blow over people's heads. I was able to test down to the part quadrillion using a mass spectrometer. Now, most of us through like all the TV shows and CSI and the NCIS, it's like they know what a mass spectrometer is, but the part quadrillion, no one know it.
No.
No one's going to understand that part.
Yeah.
That particular line of testing was the only place it is being used right now is by places like CERN or NASA, where they're actually, and the idea of being stuck in a class 10,000 clean room, it's something that they use for, again, putting a satellite together so that it can be shot into space. So, okay, when the semiconductor industry decided they didn't need to that level of testing any longer, and they didn't need that level of analysts being inside that a clean room like that any longer, I lost my job.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I was given like a severance package, all that sort of stuff, and it's like, and good luck. And when I went to other areas in the chemical industry, they were like, oh, yeah, you used to work in that clean room. It's like, well, that's too clean for what we want. We want somebody that's used to doing dirtier work. And dirty in a lab, it's not like mucking around or anything. Yeah. It's the testing levels that you and your calibrations that they're talking about. So I was told that a lot of doors started closing, even though I was at one point at the highlight of my career, I was one of the top 100 chemical analysts in the world.
Wow.
Now all these doors are closing because it's like, oh yeah, we know about you. Yeah, you're pretty famous and everything, but no, we can't use you. Yeah. And no, we can't afford to retrain you to do something else. And thank God of my education, because I went to an engineering school. They taught you economics and they taught you marketing. So I went and I wound up doing marketing for a cell phone app developer. Okay. Yeah, and I was the direct assistant to the chief marketing officer. So everybody's marketing plan for whatever the app was had to go through me before it was seen by the chief marketing officer anyway. And we had developed a $62 million a year corporation, which eventually collapsed. Programming is very fleeting. And some of the long-lasting ones, but the company and the corporation that we developed just wasn't one of them. Yeah. It became fleeting. We got some pretty good names, like the Starbucks and things like that, but it just didn't last. And then I wound up freelancing for a bunch of other companies. And with that, me and a bunch of friends, we loved playing around with the cameras, and we all could do sound work and all that kind of stuff and video editing. So we created Depictions Media. Nice. And I became the chief corporate officer for Depictions Media. Yeah. And we have a few documentaries out there. One is about to be shown in a theater here in Vancouver. Very cool. On hate crimes. And the end of it is that we've all been activists for a very long time. Human rights and things like are what is kind and near to our hearts. And one of the reasons why I love telling people's stories, because they've overcome. You have an exciting story also. Yeah. Well, I love sharing other people's stories as well. It's one of those funny things when people come on my podcast, a lot of times after the interview is done, the guests will say, did you get what you wanted out of this? And it's like, my goal really is to just shine your light. I mean, and that's how I kind of see it, Depictions Media. You're there to help propel other people's stories forward.
And that's how I feel about my podcast as well. Is I'm here to shine a light on other people who are doing really cool things and have knowledge and expertise that other people need to know about. It's not about me. I'm just the tool, the mechanism to get you out there on another platform other than the platforms that you created. So,
Right.
yeah. And so I love that kinship between us too. And the other thing that really resonates in what you said is that pivot. When I moved back to LA from Houston in 2019, I left a business in Houston. When I came back here, I said, okay, got to start over. And I could not get a job. I got a job with a company that was like a startup that didn't pay anything. Right. I was marketing, but you can't eat on shares that don't have any value, like on equity that doesn't have any value. But when it came to like finding either, other jobs like you, even something that was like maybe a level or two below what my expertise was, they wouldn't hire me because they wanted a specialist, somebody who just did this or just did that. And I think that is another issue that as you get further and further in your career, you really come across is people are, I don't know if they're intimidated or they just want somebody who only knows how to do this one particular thing. They don't want people who know how to do a lot of different things or who have a higher level of expertise.
There's a lot of fear in the business. And that's one of the things that when we actually start working with people is we try to make that fear go away. And when they're looking for employees with that fear, well, he might take over. Or I don't know. Should I hire him? She's so smart. She might be smarter than me. She might take over. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't hire her. And people get afraid of when you're very talented. Like they fear that you're more talented than they are and that you're just going to take over the whole thing and put them out.
Yeah.
And that's never been my goal.
Right.
I like collaboration.
Yeah.
And there's one of the things that I enjoyed out of you, and I look forward to doing more work with you because you see that same value as we do on our side with Depictions Media. We like collaboration. We want to collaborate with people, not take over.
Exactly. We don't live in that scarcity mindset where we only believe that there's a finite amount of things. We know that there is more than enough for everybody.
Yeah, there's more than enough market share for your business and my business to exist.
Yeah.
And I think that when our ideal customer goes through our process, they realize that.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing is if somebody said to me the other day in a networking meeting, well, how come you don't just show up and just start recording anything? So like, it doesn't work that way. You got to go through a process with people first so you can discover that there is a true collaboration. And that's one of the things. It's like when you find that true collaboration, you're more than happy to help market them. You're more than happy to help promote who they are. And like I said, I was so excited that I'm going to appear on this show that I already started tweeting about it. It's like, because I was excited because I know you understand collaboration.
Yeah. Well, when you were transitioning into entrepreneurship, what was that like? Going from being an employee, working somewhere to then owning your own business, being your own boss, collaborating with the other people that you started all of these things with. What were some of the challenges and what were some of the opportunities that presented themselves?
Well, when you're an employee, you're kind of sheltered, right? There's like a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that you don't know actually happen, or other departments or whatever that appear that you don't know what they're actually doing. I had to learn all those things.
Yeah.
So that was scary when I realized that. It's like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Well, and then the other fear was going back to, you have a spouse, right? Going to your spouse and saying, well, this is what I'm going to do. And what I discovered on that end was my wife decided that, well, you're going to need to learn certain things, right? She's like, well, why don't we start paying for these classes so you can learn them?
That's awesome.
At least learn the basics of it so that when you hire somebody to do it, that they're doing it the right way for you.
Yeah.
So that's been one of the amazing parts about my life is while there have been people who were against me, it's like what I discovered was, well, okay, let them be against me and I'll ignore them. And when I started ignoring the people who were against me, I started finding the people who were for me. And I was like, oh, well, I have all these people who are for me now. It's like, and if you go through social media and things like that, it's like, yeah, all these people are actually for you.
Yeah.
And that's really cool, warm feeling. And that's where gratitude starts to come in.
Definitely.
Right? That's like, we'll touch on the woo-woo for a second here.
Yeah, please. Well, when you were saying this, I was trying to think of the phrase, is it where your energy flows, where attention goes? So
Yeah.
if you're paying attention to the negative aspects of any situation, you're going to see more and more of those. But if you turn around and you start looking at the positive aspects and the people who are supporting you and the things that are coming in that are awesome, then more of those things will appear.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's part of the laws of attraction. What you focus on is what you get.
Yeah.
And I decided to focus on those people who are going to help me, or they're going to, and I can easily help them because they believe in the same things I believe in.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the ways that you work with people today. Because I know, looking at your LinkedIn, I'm like, you do SEO for this company, you do this other marketing and branding strategy. You have, again, like a lot on your plate. So what's your approach look like? And how do you choose who you want to work with? And how do you typically work with people?
Okay. So you went through our interview process, right? And it's not really what people think it is. It's just me learning, can we at least hold a conversation together?
Yeah.
Right? So we are able to hold a conversation. I started to learn about what your goals and everything were and how they actually matched up. Now, we did the podcast interview and all that sort of stuff. And I discovered that you're a great person to collaborate with. Some other people, they fall into other categories where we actually can jump in and start working on a documentary with them. Where we actually do charge people for editing. And what we do is, as we set up another set of planning meetings where we just start to discover further what their message is and how we can actually put that together in film.
Nice.
And then we start to budget it, figure out locations and all that kind of stuff, and how long it should be, how short it should be, so that we actually get a story told.
Yeah.
And like I said, we have one out there right now that is on hate crimes. And on that end, we didn't actually shoot a lot of the footage at all. All we did was edit it and put it together into a package that when we sent the final product back to the person who actually was coordinating the whole thing, he cried.
That's beautiful.
He couldn't stop crying because the hate crime was a murder where a group of white supremacists attacked a man in front of his temple. He was the maintenance and cleaning person and also worshiper at this particular temple. It was deep temple. And because he had white supremacy, we know what comes with that package, right? We have a known for that. And he was trying to defend his way of life and his beliefs and was murdered in the process. And they put a dedication to him inside the temple. Yes. So his picture's hanging there in memorial of and everything inside the temple. And all that footage was sent to us. And we started to tell a story from it. The story about how this man was a hero. And at the end of that, we started listing all these other hate crimes that have happened against people just because someone was afraid that you're different.
Yeah.
And I think that was really where our client started to cry, was when he realized it's like how much more work we actually have to get people to stop being bigoted.
Yeah.
To start
Unlimited amounts of work.
Yeah.
But those stories are important to share. I think more and more people are turned on to the idea of watching documentaries and docuseries. I know I'm watching a couple of different series right now on Hulu. And then my boyfriend is also a documentary filmmaker. So he's working on a couple of big projects right now. But yeah, it's important to share those stories and tell those stories and help educate people and inspire people and not keep those things hidden.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that sets us apart with it is the process that we sit down and we talk to you about what your message is before we turn on a camera or record. We got to figure out what the story is. Is like, are we going to record just about everything after that? Yeah, because that's probably a good idea. I learned this from a walk that we did across British Columbia into the next province over, Alberta. 1,400-kilometer walk we did.
Wow.
Trying to cause awareness for fibromyalgia. And what I learned was that I should have never turned the camera off. The second you turn the camera off, that's when something magical could happen.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
The lesson is for those who are listening, even if you're recording this for marketing purposes, because you're a marketing guru, right? Record as much as you can, especially if it's a documentary situation, because it doesn't happen again.
Right.
If it's a studio thing, yeah, you can recreate it again. Just, take two.
Yeah. So that was my next question is, do you also do that kind of work, commercial work, studio work with companies? So it's not just documentaries, but it's all storytelling, no matter what the narrative is or what the vehicle is. Yeah.
In some cases, what we do is we recreate the studio inside of your office. So we can be pretty mobile. And when we have relationships with other companies, see back to collaboration again, we have where we can send you to another company. We have a budget for them that has a studio, and they do everything in studio, and then we get the footage back and we edit it and tell the story again.
Well, what's your favorite part of the work that you do now versus being that engineer and having that life?
Oh, I think my favorite part is actually doing the sound work. Yeah, I'll tell everybody a little secret. The sound editor for Depictions Media, or one of the sound editors for Depictions Media, when I'm not wearing my corporate hat, has a 50% hearing loss.
Really? Wow.
And here's the secret to this, right? And I learned this early on when I was doing sound, because I used to do sound as a hobby. And while I was in university, I did actually wind up working on a big event. I got invited as a hobbyist. I got invited to do some real professional work with the likes of the lead guitarist from Led Zeppelin. I won't mention any names because everybody knows who that is by now. And what it was a festival. And I wound up running the soundboard for this festival in Philadelphia. And I was like, wow, okay, that was an amazing thing. But the trick that I learned early on was a good set of earphones.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter, because in that situation, when you put the headphones on and the hearing aids get in the way anyhow. But what I wanted to be doing a crowd, because we have done a number of crowdfund videos for different films and everything. And I held up production on a crowdfund video for over 8 hours because somebody in an office building was hammering nails.
Oof.
And somebody said, you can't possibly be deaf. It's like, how could you hear that, right? Well, the microphones pick up everything. So long story short was the producer said, I can't believe this is still going on. And we went to early lunch and everything, came back again. I took the earphones and I put them on his head. And I said, listen to it yourself. And I said, I'll try a different few settings. Right. Try to dim it out. And he said, it's still there. He's like, no matter what, you've done 10 different settings and it's still there. This hammering. And I would, for sake of argument, but why don't we just try that right now? Can you hear that?
I can see movement.
You can't hear it then.
I could hear a tiny, but I couldn't hear it too loudly.
But the thing is, when your sound editor, tell them that I actually intentionally did that. Because what's actually going to happen is he can't get rid of it. It's going to appear. And if he cuts it and splices it, you have knocking appearing in different areas where you don't want it. It's like, oh, I don't want that there. Why is that still there? One of the other things was something as simple as this pen, right?
Oh, yeah.
Click, click.
Yeah.
There was somebody sitting here it was another crowdfund video situation where somebody was sitting there clicking the pen.
That's the worst.
I'm like,
or tapping your fingers. Yeah. Any kind of noise. That's why we try to give people like little sheets, tip sheets, cheat sheets on where should you do your interview. Make sure that there are no barking dogs in the house. Make sure that they're in a different room. I'm lucky that, I was given a little hint because I do like recording on Zoom. There's a lot of other platforms. I just really like Zoom. And you can record the sound for each person separately. So then if something happens on one end, you can cut it out. Also, the mic that I use, actually, it's more of a film production mic, but it's directional. So even if something else goes on, my dogs are here. If something else happens, because I have a home office, it doesn't pick up that sound. But most people don't have this kind of tools and expertise in their home office or their regular office when they're doing interviews.
Zoom's a great product because it has a bunch of filters to it.
Yeah.
Because right now I have 3 or 4 fans blowing right now that you can't hear.
No.
because Zoom filters them out.
Yeah.
Because in our office here, we have, let's just say, an ungodly amount of hard drives sitting around because, well, you do production also. You know that certain things don't compress.
Yeah.
And you need a lot of hard drive space to store them.
Mm-hmm.
And you also know that while we're recording this video, when you go to edit it and you go to put the sound and the video back together again, it takes a while for it to process.
Yep.
And the more empty hard drive space you have, the faster it runs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the actual movie industry, they have farms. They have hard drive farms where these things actually go to and render them out, but most of us don't have that.
Right. Most of us don't have that. Yeah.
We're not Disney, right?
So how do people come to you? Has it been mostly word of mouth? Do you market your company so that you can get clients in different areas?
So we have a news blog that has a contact page to it, depictions.media.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one way that people get a hold of us. A lot of it is by referral, or they found the podcast, something like 14,000 downloads a day. It's very possible that somebody found the podcast, and considering that we're listed on Google, Apple, Spotify, you name it, we're probably on there. And we're also can be found in some pretty obscure places in Eastern Europe and things like that. So it tells you that we're also global.
Mm-hmm.
So either they found us through depictions.media, they found us through one of the podcast platforms that they listen to on a regular basis, or maybe they found us via Rumble because we have a Rumble page. And they decide to come back and find us again because at the beginning of every podcast, thank you for listening to Depictions Media. It plays at the beginning of everything, or at the beginning of every video that we have on the Rumble page. It starts off with our logo, Depictions Media. So in that respect, we do a lot of marketing, making sure that we have our message appearing somewhere in every product we put out there. And then we share a lot of that over social media. So that becomes another piece of our marketing plan. On the other end of that, we don't actually have any real marketing pages to our website. And we own a different bunch of versions of Depictions Media. Whether it's a .com or .net or whatever, we own it, but they all lead back to this, should be leading back to a lot of the same places. If not, it dead ends to an email box or something like that, where people actually get a hold of us and say, our email box is full. And in a networking meeting, we actually recently shared our calendars, and they were like, your calendars are absolutely full. We're booked 8 weeks out. I actually worked to do this, and this is how excited I was to work with you. I actually worked you into someplace.
Well, and I did the same for you. My podcast interview calendar is booked until January.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I even opened up more time slots. I still have a wait list of probably 50 people. And I can't open up any more time. But except for people like, I was on your podcast, we got along. I was like, okay, I need to have you on mine. Those special circumstances, right? Those people that we really want to continue connecting with. Yeah,
exactly. Our marketing plan is basically by referral.
Yeah.
And a lot of those referrals are people like you, where you have a PR end of your business also, right?
Yeah.
So we work with a number of PR companies around the world.
Yeah.
And they do an amazing job of sending us referrals.
Awesome.
Or finding people that need the work done.
Right.
And in some cases, because I know you have a process also. We talked about that process in your podcast interview, where you screen people out to figure out, okay, they belong here. No, they know a lot about things, so we can actually get them straight to media. You know how to subdivide people so that they know where they're going to be and what it is that they need to learn before they actually get to being in front of the camera or in front of the mic, and that's important to know. Because we actually have a referral system where we actually refer people back away from us because you're not ready to be in front of the camera. We have one company, this is on a corporate end, they decided to send their hero over to us. And the hero has a phobia of being in front of the camera.
Oh, no.
The little red light went on the camera and he ran.
Wow.
We couldn't stop him. He was gone. He was in his car and gone by the time we caught up to him.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the client says, well, what did you do to him? It's like, we turned the camera on.
Yeah.
And didn't make sense, but phobias only make sense to the person who experiences the phobia. In other situations where, because we used to have a syndicated radio show, we invited somebody on, and thank God they had a partner with them, because the partner spoke, but they didn't speak until the on-air light went off. The second the on-air light went on, they clammed up. It's like, because they had this phobia. These things exist, and it's important to find those things out ahead of time.
Oh, yeah. Before you booked the crew, you have the studio time, all that stuff, because then you're just wasting money and time and talent. And I think that's one of the things is a lot of people, just like people think they need PR when they really need to go back and make sure they know who they are as a brand before they get to marketing and PR, like what we've talked about. It's also important to do media training. And even for like my current company, the CEO has been in her line of work for over 20 years, but PR has not been part of the business. So now I'm getting her interviews and she's amazing at them. But I'm also like, I will create one sheets for you. I'll make sure we have all your talking points, that we know the questions ahead of time, because she wants to be prepared. Because even being in marketing, she hasn't been in PR. So it doesn't matter how long you've been in business or if you're starting out, if you're scared or have any fear of being in front and doing interviews, there are ways that we can help you. And there are people who are better at that than I am, even. Like you said, I can refer people to the expert who's going to get them comfortable speaking in front of the camera. Or I can give them some quick one-sheets, some YouTube tutorials, and have them practice with me via Zoom. You know, there's so many different options out there to get people comfortable. But
Exactly, right? One of the things you talked about is the one sheet. There's some really big corporations out there that do not have one sheets. I should say medium-sized corporations, because we get to the giants. They have it all together. One of the other things I used to train people on in media was, if you have a company, you got to be prepared just in case there's an incident.
Yes.
And, oh, well, I only have like 25 people. I was like, well, 25 people, you could have an incident happen. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what if, God forbid, there was a fire or an accident or something like that your company car was involved in an automobile accident? Well, the press is going to come to you.
Right.
It's like, what are you going to say? Well, it wasn't. It's like, no, you have to have a standard statement that represents your brand.
Yes.
And I had to train them how to respond to that, so that they didn't get, it's like, you can't give away information, because if you start giving away information trying to say it was that this other person's fault, or it was that fault, or something like that, if you start giving away, it's like you could put your company in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And they weren't quite understanding what the power of media truly was. And that if I say the wrong thing, or even say the right thing at the wrong time, you're in trouble. And if you have 25 employees, that's 25 people that could lose their job. Yeah.
If you don't have a certain specific message for the whole company, that's 25 different opinions of what really happened that could go out there, whether they're supposed to talk about it or not.
Right. So you need to have a designated person, a designated message, and you might want to actually make sure that you pass that message past a legal expert to make sure that it isn't going to hurt your brand or cause some sort of liability.
Yeah.
We also do audiobooks, and you'd be surprised at the number of consultants out there that don't understand copyright.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't understand copyright. And the reason why basically I only work with consultants or nonfiction writers is because you can start getting into fiction, or that based on a true story.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I had to try to explain this to a friend, and she wasn't catching on. And she went off to the studio with her story, and because the studio invited her in, because, oh, you have a fantastic story, we want to tell it, right? And the studio pastor slid across the desk a check. And I told her, I said, you didn't take the check, did you? Oh, yeah, I took the check. Did you cash it yet? She's like, oh, yeah, put it straight in the bank. And she's like, why? I said, because you just signed all your copyrights away, that you can never tell that story again.
Yeah.
And you better hope that they're actually going to tell the story right away.
Yeah.
It's like, because you just sold everything away. You can't even as much as write a book about it now. And she said, what doesn't? It's like, why are you saying that? I said, because you just signed a contract with them. It's like, read through all the paperwork. And the friend she was so angry with me. She's like, well, why didn't you tell me that beforehand? Because I told you not to go to the studio to begin with.
Yikes.
It's like, that, don't go without hiring a lawyer.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So it's one of the reasons why we don't do a lot of fiction. We'd rather do nonfiction works with consultants, coaches, and wellness workers and things like that, where they're trying to provide information to people. Because then we can actually work with them to make sure that we're doing a shared copyright.
Nice.
They own the royalties. They're paying us a fee, but they own the royalties on it. So when it appears on Audible and the book sells copies on Audible, that they actually get to keep the royalties, because it gets kind of messy.
Yes. We could talk for hours, I think, because there's so many, I'm like, yes, and I had this experience, or there's so many things I want to talk about with you, but I want to shift a little bit to the podcast. When did you move into podcasting, and what was the impetus behind that?
Well, we had a syndicated radio show.
Yeah.
And we were syndicated across Canada with a human rights radio show.
Awesome.
And we just kind of saw radio going in a different direction. And as most people know, we actually use the Spreaker app to broadcast our podcast. Fantastic service. And we discovered it because we were on radio. And we wound up in a disagreement with the main studio that we were syndicated out of over women's rights.
Wow.
Versus transgender rights. And if you've gone through a lot of our marketing and everything, you've probably found our tagline of, how do you want your story told? You may have also come across the saying that we believe that everybody has a voice and everybody should be heard at least once.
Yeah.
The radio station doesn't agree with that this person should be heard at least once, because they are seen as a complete hater. Well, this person, she's seen as a hater, but it wasn't when you actually sat down and talked to her. And I did the pre-interview, and I recorded the pre-interviews. I have several recordings of Anika on a hard drive because we talked. And I played it, and I said, it's a misconception. We should allow her to be heard. And they said, well, if you keep pushing forward with this, we're just going to yank your show off of our programming. And I said, I felt very strongly about making sure that this lady got heard. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll solve the problem for you. I'll just remove our show from your programming.
Oh, gosh.
And we brought everything in-house. And we actually, at the time, we had a film studio that we could use. And through another relationship with who's now one of our marketing experts, she does wonderful, 33 Dolphins does wonderful marketing strategy for people. And up here in Vancouver, that's all she actually does. But I used to work with her husband in film. We're both camera guys. Nice. Him a little better than me, but when we finally closed that studio down, I brought a bunch of equipment home, and then I just put the whole entire radio station inside my house, and that's where we have everything now. So, and we're able to cloud things from different editors and everything that we work with around the area. So, so that's how the podcast actually got to be a podcast. It was straight from radio.
Yeah, very cool. And that's, again, it's so funny because I had a radio show in Houston, and then we also put on Facebook Live, and then I moved to LA, and we still did the show streaming a little bit, but it was a lot harder because before we were in the same studio and we could do a lot of different things. And that's when I switched to podcasting to make it a little easier. Instead of having co-hosts, it's just me now, but I get to bring on amazing guests every time and have great conversations like we've had today. So we have covered a lot of topics, a lot of subjects. Michael, I'd love for you to tell people how they can find you, how they can apply to work with you, and just learn more and read the stories and hear the episodes and everything from Depictions Media.
Well, the best way is to go to depictions.media. If you want to just simply find our podcast and just listen to what we have as far as podcasts, we have the Influencer Club, which you appear on. And we have policy and rights, which is what government policy is actually saying about our human rights. And we have Sunday Offering, which is me putting on my reverend's cap and speaking from the pulpit. Yeah, I was ordained once.
Well, I'm ordained by the internet church, the Universal Life Church.
Oh, cool. I was ordained by the Presbyterian Church.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was just so I could do a wedding, help somebody get married, but that was it.
I actually used to do Christian education.
Oh, very cool.
And the reason why I'm not attached to a church anymore is because I believe that Jesus Christ wants us to love each other and not judge each other.
Yeah, snaps for that.
So, yeah. So that's the whole premise of Sunday offering is we're supposed to love each other and not judge each other. So you'll find all those on our broadcast page in the right-hand corner of our homepage while you're flipping through different news, blog posts, and things like that. There's a drop-down menu. It's quite simple. Go to our broadcast page, and there's a way to get into all of the documentaries, into the different podcasts. And we also edit podcasts for people, and there's going to be a new up-and-coming one called Living Well with Gita, where a functional nutritionist is going to be talking about nutrition and how we can live healthier.
Awesome.
So, yeah. And then if you want, there's also a contact page in there. Scroll down until you find the contact page, click on it, fill in the form. Please complete the form. It helps a lot. And then we usually get back to you by way of email within a week so that we can actually get you booked into some sort of planning meeting and find out what your message is, your story is, so we can get the ball rolling and actually start working together.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Are there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share? That's part one. And part two is, do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
Last words of wisdom is trust your gut.
Yeah.
Do unto others as you would want them to do to you. Basic message of respect. Yeah, that would be it.
But one too many people forget to live by. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Michael. And to the audience, I'm going to have everything linked. I'll have the website, I'll have the podcast episode I did, and I'll have the other resources that Michael has mentioned so that you can learn more about the power of sharing your story, how to share your story effectively through media. And if you need podcast editing or any other services, you'll be able to know how to reach out to Michael and his team.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so with that, thank you for listening to another episode of Your Brand Amplified. And I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing entrepreneur story and expert. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.